Welcome to the Tripod, where we break down the NRL every game, every week from a punting perspective. I'm Jacob Wynn. This is the Round 10 Magic Round punting preview. Got a massive show for you guys tonight. Obviously, last week we were 4-0 on the best bets. Perfect round on best bets. That is 9 out of 9 winning rounds on the best bets. 27-12 overall for 2021 season. The mixed matchup did lose in an 18-all draw between the matchup of Roosters versus Broncos. Broncos had the 18 points, just couldn't get any more Saturday night. So again, agonizing loss on that one, full disclosure. And multis, we went 1-1 last round. So we're down 2 units for the season, yet to hit a big one. But if you're having 100 as an example stake on every best bet and mixed matchup, you're up over $1,400 for the season. And I wrapped all the games in round 9 and obviously all the winning best bets in the live recap on Sunday, and I went into exactly why hitting 69% on best bets is unsustainable. I'm not going to rehash that. If you guys are more interested in a little bit more in-depth reviews of rounds, go back and listen to the recap, but I'll say the one main part. There is a huge difference between winning 50% of your line bets and 52.5%. Why? Because anybody in the world can hit 50% on 50-50 markets. But how many people do you know that are honestly breaking even with their punting? And 52.5% is what you have to hit at $1.91 to break even. So if it's a huge difference, even though it doesn't sound like it, between winning 52.5% and 50%, imagine the difference in the edge you need to find over the bookies to hit 69%. It's just ridiculous, and I can't keep it going, but I do obviously put in a lot of work to try and have successful rounds each week, and let's see if we can do it. Now, being Magic Round it is, especially interesting, the dynamic there of home ground being eliminated. We're going to get into all that with Tristan, and I've got a special bonus celebrity segment. I've got Brent Douglas, the NRL STATS MAN, on this week with an anytime try scorer tips segment, because I know you guys love that. I know everyone loves their same game multis, so I'm specifically diving into a bit of anytime try scorer theory, and Tristan from TopSport is also going to share some insights specifically into anytime try scorers. I spoke about them also on the recap and why I very rarely dabble and why I don't give out many anytime try scorers. Again, that might be something you're interested in the recap, but for now you're tuning in tonight because you want my best bets, and I have just 2 so far, and I will tell you there were 5 other matches I quite liked. I just could not get there across the line with each of them to make it a best bet. I'll explain why when I get to each of those matches. But for now, I'm definitely taking the Cronulla Sharks plus 8.5. It's $1.91 on Bet365 and also on Unibet. And I think the Sharks have been considered an absolute dumpster fire, but they are not actually a terrible team. I really think for the last 2 games, the fact that they had to play in Melbourne and then at the Panthers at Bluebet Stadium has magnified their deficiencies. Now, Bunnies are a good team, and you guys know I don't like to bet against a good team off a bad loss, and you don't get much of a bigger situation like that when the Bunnies lost 50-0, but there's a reason they lost as well. They're still missing Latrell, still missing Cam Murray, huge one in the middle there, and Campbell Graham. So they're not at the level of a Storm and a Panthers, which means the Sharkies actually do have a chance this week. And I expect the Bunnies will bounce back and play well, but I really think Cronulla's going to surprise people, throw some footy around Suncorp Stadium on Saturday, and make it an entertaining match, and I've got them covering the 8.5. And then the match straight after that, Saturday night, I'm taking the Cowboys plus 13.5, $1.83 it is on TopSport. And the next best is really to take plus 12 at $1.90 Ladbrokes or Neds. There's a few reasons I like the Cowboys this week. It's a Queensland game. You know, they'll get a few supporters to the ground as well. They get the confidence. I really like taking a team off a last-second kind of victory and a comeback victory, which they got last week, because they're not going to be overconfident knowing that they had to come back and just squeak out the game, but it still gives the team a boost. They go the same 17 that won last week. They can build on the combinations. We know Tamalolo's back in the team fit and in some red-hot form, whereas the Roosters once again are forced into changes, and one of the reasons I'm taking this now as well is 2 very key players in Sam Walker and Victor Radley are under injury clouds for different reasons I'll get into, and if either of them is ruled out, significantly improves the Cowboys' chances, and it's also going to have an effect on the line dropping. So that's why I say play that now, but even if those players happen to play, I can still live with that Cowboys line. I think they've showed enough life and consistency in their performances the last 4 or 5 weeks. As I said, there were another 5 matches. I do also have a lean. I was kind of on the fence for best bets. So even though there's a chance I could add another play or two before Friday, I'll tell you guys exactly what I was looking at for those other games and see if it lines up with anything you guys agree with. But before I dive into all the action, let's throw to Tristan from Top Sport with Market Watch, and he's going to specifically tell us where the action's been so far this round from a bookie's perspective, and also share a bit of insight into home advantage and how much that's worth because of this being an interesting round where really only one team is playing at home.
Hello Tripod family, it's Tristan Merlihan here from Top Sport. We've got an exciting weekend of football coming up with Magic Round, every game coming to us from Suncorp Stadium. There's been some significant moves already, obviously on the back of some player movements. The Melbourne Storm game is the obvious one. That line opened up at 21.5, got out to 22. Then when the players dropped out, it got into 15.5. There's been a little bit of edge back towards the Storm, out to 16 with Pappenhausen on that extended bench and probably looking likely to play. The other game that's seen some movement is the Cronulla Sharks game, where they were back from 8.5 into a flat 8. There's obviously a bit of doubt still over some of the Rabbitohs players. Being Magic Round, every game here at Suncorp Stadium, so it takes away that element of the home ground advantage. That's one of the key factors in how we assess a line. Obviously, there's certain teams that have a much more powerful home ground advantage. You look at your teams like Manly, the Storm, other teams that Warriors in years gone by, and your Cowboys up north. The home ground advantage can range from a couple of points for the teams that are in and about Sydney to 6 or 8 points. In some of those instances, it's obviously situational, depends where the other team's travelling from, should I say. So it's a tricky one to give a black and white example, but they would be the teams that are normally most heavily factored. And obviously in years gone by, the Fortress at Brisbane was always a hard ground to win at too. In terms of the anytime try scorers, Jacob asked me to touch on that because I know you guys are chatting about this week. We normally set our odds based on how many tries we expect a player to score for that team in a given week, and we try to map it out according to that, and then obviously that changes based on how many tries that team is expected to score. It's a very popular market now, the anytime try scorer, particularly with the same game multis, and in particular this year with the lopsided games when you've got a lot of teams expecting to put up big scores against some of the weaker outfits. So we're finding that to be a very popular conveyance, and it's all determined based on how many tries we expect an individual player to score in that team, given the amount of expected tries they're meant to score. So it's an exciting one. It gets a lot of interest, and there's plenty of derivatives that come out of it as well. So best of luck to all the punters out there on this exciting Magic Round weekend, and as always, gamble responsibly.
Thanks to Tristan. I will talk about that big line move with the Dragons when I get to that game. I will follow up with Tristan on a couple of things that he said in that segment. I don't know if that raised your guys' eyebrows as well, but to say that some teams have 6 to 8 points of home field advantage, to me sounds way, way too high. I'd really like to question that one, and I will, and I'll try and get more insight on that one. And the other part is quite interesting to hear that the bookies, way they look at it with pricing up anytime try scorers based on predicting a specific number of tries a player will score, and then you'd obviously have your kind of standard deviations away from that if a player can score multiples. But what I actually will follow up on is to get a bit more of an elaboration on how they get that number for a given player. Remember, I do have a couple of anytime try scorer picks coming up later in the show from the NRL Stats Man, but I'll put that in after I've gotten into a few games. So I'm going to jump into the games now. Just one other thing I want to say in general. When I kind of talk about the games, obviously I was trying to set the table, tell you what the line is, and I talk a bit about ins and outs. And just to give you guys a heads up, I don't tell you guys like every single player that's in or out. Often teams shuffle a benchman or a back rower, or they bring like a reserve winger on for a different outside back, or just somebody else comes onto the interchange bench. And I don't name every player because I don't tend to name the personnel changes where it doesn't change my opinion either way on what the odds should be if one player is kind of like for like swap. In saying that, sometimes I will mention a player is out or in, and that doesn't necessarily mean I think it would shift the line, but it's just something that was noteworthy to me. So I'm just kind of saying that as a rule that, like, I appreciate people watch the pod as part of their wanting to preview the upcoming round, but if you're into like your super coach or something like that, obviously check the specific lineups yourself. Now, we start the round 10 On Friday, because it is Magic Round, it's a little bit different. Double header Friday, triple header Saturday, triple header Sunday. So I reckon, lads, here's my first tip. Thursday night, you tell the missus you're having a night off the footy to focus on her. That should go down a treat. But then we'll move to the actual footy kicking off Friday night, and the Tigers play the Knights, and the line is -5.5, Newcastle favoured. So here is a couple of personnel changes for Wes. Dewey, who probably had his best game of the season, is moved to centres from 5'8". Moses Mbai plays 5'8" in this one, and Tommy Talau's back. Now, Dewey's a very versatile player. I've seen him play in the outside backs, played a bit of centre when he was at South. Mbai also quite versatile, and I know he can play 5'8", but I mean, my mind goes back to round 1 where Mbai played 5'8" when Dewey was suspended. He was fairly useless to be brutally honest. So it's a curious move for me. The Knights are able to name the same 17 that made that comeback in Wagga Wagga. Now, this is a rematch, and the Tigers actually got the chocolates against Newcastle in Newcastle earlier this year. I do think there's a revenge factor there for the Knights. When you get beaten at home by a team that is, not as good as you, which you have to agree that the Knights are the better team here. I still think the Knights are going to make the finals this year. And I know they've got good character. They kind of showed that in their squad, that they've got that belief coming back from down 16-0 last week. And they've got the game breakers too in Ponga and Best. So you guys know I'm quite high on the Tigers, but I don't really love their chances in this one. If there was ever, I look across the board, the only position I really think where the Tigers could maybe get an edge would be at halfback. Brooks is a lot more experienced than Phoenix Crossland, so if there ever was a game for him to kind of stand up and just have a man of match performance and lead his team to victory, it would be this one. But I can't have a lot of confidence in West. I was really quite appalled with how badly they defended last week. Luckily we weren't on them, but against the Titans they were leaking points way too easy, whereas the Knights really impressed. So I was so close to playing Knights -5.5. That definitely was my lean. And ultimately, I just thought, am I really getting line value? I feel like everybody would be on the Knights here. I feel like nobody really wants to back the Tigers. So have I really got a 60% plus winning play on the Knights here when it's a bit obvious and a bit on the public side? Maybe it's just not quite enough value there to take it, although I do lean that way. Then we move to Manly playing the Broncos. And of course, Manly's listed first, but they're sacrificing that home game, and of course Brisbane gets the luxury of an away game on their schedule being played at Suncorp Stadium, and they are an 8.5 point underdog. In terms of Manly, Taniela Paseka is in HIA protocol, so they could lose yet another prop, but they do get back Marty Tapau for sure. The Broncos lost Pat Carrigan to an ACL. That does hurt, and they had to pick a captain, and they've gone with Jake Turpin, who's a very inexperienced young guy, but you look at who else their options were, it does kind of highlight the point that there's a bit of a lack of leadership with this Broncos side, but good luck to Jake Turpin. He's had some decent form the last few weeks at least, and it was a certainly very tough loss for the Broncos last week. While they covered the line for us, it was also a tough loss for us because we had them in the mixed matchup. They fell a point short in that. They fell a point short of victory in North Queensland. You get some encouragement from the fact that they actually played tough for 80 minutes away from home. They had not done that yet this year. But similar to the Panthers loss, if you recall, a few weeks ago, the reason Brisbane lost is they're just missing that killer instinct late in games or like a clutch half to come up with that match-winning play. They don't have it. They missed it last week and they missed it against Panthers. And it's the difference in tight games. That's the difference, having a player that can ice a game. And you look at the Seagulls, they've got that in DCE, and it already has shown to be the difference in a game this year. And, even last week, the Seagulls won by 6, but it was pretty close. They had to tackle Kenny Mamalo into touch in the 79th minute to hold on for victory. So they know their defense has to be improved. But in attack, they're looking so good. Obviously, we all know why. Turbo makes the world of difference. Now, we've been on Brisbane the last couple of weeks and we've won multiple best bets on them. And I did say before they played the Titans 2 weeks ago, Kevy has the Broncos playing really hard at home. So you do generally know you can trust the Broncos to put up a good performance at home. On paper, I think the forward packs are pretty even. I think the wingers and the centers are pretty even. The clear differences I see in these sides is the halfbacks and the fullbacks. So I asked the question to myself, is that worth over 8.5 points? Because the line's 8.5 and Brisbane's really the home team. And from a line value perspective, probably it can't be worth that many points. So although we've seen sometimes when they get a roll on, Manly can just pile the points on, I do think Brisbane has a chance to win this game. So my lean is to take the Broncos, but I just have this gut feeling that we've gone to the well several times with Brisbane, and we also do know just when you start to trust them too much, they are capable of letting you down. It's just enough to keep me off the Broncos because I have to, of course, acknowledge that this Manly side is revitalised with Tommy Turbo there. I'm actually staying away from this game, although I do lean Broncos plus the points if I had to play it. Moving to Saturday, the Dogs host the Raiders. Sorry, that's instinct kicking in. The Dogs host them on paper, but of course, Suncorp Stadium, again, the line is 15.5 points, even though this Raiders team has lost 6 of 7. They're a 15.5 point favourite. That's how bad the Dogs have been going. I do really try and stick to punting perspective, but I got to go off on a little tangent here because this Flanagan story is such a headline everywhere. Everyone's saying how they feel sorry for him. I'm just going to say Kyle Flanagan's fine. Like, he got a great opportunity as a young player. He got to come into a Sharks team, play some games in the halves when they had halves injury. That was a great way to just dip his toe into first grade. He got an amazing opportunity to open up, to go to the Roosters, a class organisation, play with class teammates, and play 7 for a season last year. Everyone acted like when the Roosters told him that they weren't going to be looking to extend his contract beyond 2021, like they were booting him or they were treating him as though it was his fault for not winning the comp. It was just them being honest and saying, hey, pursue another opportunity if you can get one. We know we've got Sam Walker. We've got to spend our cap elsewhere. And they let him pursue other opportunities. And he did. And he got a 3-year deal at a team with the Bulldogs, a young and up-and-coming team, so less pressure, a team that was going to hand him the keys, and every opportunity to lock up the 7 jersey. Now, his form, hasn't been the best, but I said from the beginning of the year, it was a tough situation. Everyone's acting like he's going to be the saviour or something, and it reminded me a bit of Brisbane signing Brodie Croft a couple of years ago. And the fact of the matter is, he's had a couple of bad plays last week, in particular, a key moment, a first tackle kick out on the full when they just got a repeat set. But the fact also is this Bulldogs team still has Wakeham, Lockie Lewis, Avarillo. They need to give other halves a chance as well. They can't just say they're married to Flanagan. We all know Burton's going to be the 6 next year. So Flanagan's been dropped to reserves. It's not going to kill him. He's got plenty of time to get his confidence back, play good footy, and if he deserves it, he'll get his opportunity to get back there into the halves. So in this game, Avarillo's the 7, Wakeham's the 6. I wouldn't be surprised if they do reverse those roles. Dylan Napa returns for the Dogs. Rapana's out for the Raiders. Sutton is out. Hudson Young moves to lock. Hodgson is back. He's starting on the bench, and Joe Tapine is out. As I said, they've really struggled, the Raiders, blowing a 16-point lead last week and losing 6 of their last 7 games after starting the season 2-0. Looking at this specific matchup, definitely, to me, the Raiders are still stronger across the board, and there is that clear edge at 9-7-6, which is obviously vital position group there. And there is still a long way to go in this season, as bad as it's been for the Raiders. They are 2 points outside the 8 with, we've still got 15, 16 rounds to go. So this hope is far from lost if they are willing to put the work in and turn up. But they're not a class of talent anymore, this Raiders team, that can just show up and win. They're going to have to fight for it. So if you want to bet on the Raiders in this one, you need to believe the squad is still tight. The squad is still playing for Ricky and sticking together. I can't 100% guarantee that, so I'm not playing the Raiders. Now, I look at the Dogs. They got that great win, their only win of 2021 against the Sharks, and they've been garbage the last 2 weeks. It was like that win satisfied them and took a bit of pressure off them. I actually thought the Dogs might fight hard last week against the Dragons because it was a winnable game for them. And I guess you could say they did fight hard for like 50 minutes, but then that game got blown open. I kind of see this game the same way. They know the Raiders are struggling, so the Doggies should see it as a winnable game, and they should be willing to rip in. But I'm kind of torn because I also could see this being the perfect let's get our season back on track game for the Raiders and taking out 2 months of frustrations on them. So while I lean the Dogs with the amount of points line value, I do struggle to see, like, catching 15.5's a lot against a struggling Raiders team that's not full strength. But I do struggle to see where the points will come from for the Dogs if the Raiders really apply themselves and dial in here. I could also see this one getting ugly. So I don't have the confidence to play the Dogs on the line, but it's too many points to lay with the Raiders in their current circumstances, I believe. But we move to Sharks Rabbitohs, where I've said I do have a best bet. I'm taking the plus 8.5 available on a couple of bookies still. Although the Sharks will be missing Jesse Ramian, Dugan is recalled, and Andrew Fafita plays his first game for the club this year. Now, I don't think that's significant to the line, but when you've been going through a really rough spell, maybe his big personality and experience breathes a little bit of life into the squad. On the Rabbitohs side of things, I know Tristan actually mentioned there's a few players in doubt. I'm not specifically sure who is in doubt for the Bunnies, or if the little bit of money's just been coming because other people have seen the Sharks as possibly value as well. But from what I understand, Adam Reynolds will be back. Now, some news might have broken today, but pretty sure Adam Reynolds, he's either playing against the club he's going to play for next year in the Sharks, or he's playing in his future home stadium and he's going to go and join the Broncos. Either way, it feels like a very big game for Reynolds to announce himself back in the team after they've just lost by 50, and exclamation point, and especially the fact that he's showing himself off either to his new teammates on the field or to his new fans in the stands, potentially. But in saying all that, there's still key players out that I mentioned before. Latrell for one more game suspended, Cam Murray, Campbell Graham. That's why this match is not be on the Sharks. A similar situation to the Raiders. They've had a horrible season, but if the squad unites, they can still make the finals. There's plenty of time, and because there's such a separation at the top of the competition, it's wide open for who can make the 8. Anybody can string a couple of wins together, and they're back in finals footy contention. So people are making out that Cronulla has no hope. Actually, they do have hope. They've just played the Storm and the Panthers, who we all agree are the best 2 teams in the land in back-to-back games. Most teams would have lost those pretty handily. So, look, now you play the Bunnies. You can argue that's the most brutal stretch imaginable, playing those 3 in a row. But with the outs the Bunnies have, I give Cronulla a chance. That's why I'm taking the plus 8.5. And not only is that my best bet, but it's the second match involved in the mixed matchup this week. Simply taking the Cronulla Sharks to outscore the Tigers at $2.50. So from a value point of view, both these teams, Cronulla and West, are expected to score about 18 points, kind of like Roosters and Broncos were last week. And I've made my case why I think the Sharkies, I really think like Sean Johnson's been back in this team for 3 or 4 weeks, but they've played such good defenses and they've barely had the footy that he hasn't been able to show what he can do. You got Moylan off the bench as well. I like the chances that they throw it around. The Bunnies' strength is not their defense. So I like Sharkies for a few points, and I've questioned the halves combo change with West and talked about how I like the Knights defensively and I lean to Newcastle this week. That's why my mixed matchup this week is Sharks to outscore Tigers. $2.50 odds. You can have up to $200 on that on Top Sport. And if you need to join, the promo code is Tripod. Moving to the late game Saturday night, where I also have a best bet where I'm taking the Cowboys plus 13.5, and that best bet is on Top Sport as well. In the alt line, $1.83, and they're playing the Roosters, of course. Drew Hutchison is out, Lachie Lamb is in, Satili Tupouniua back from suspension. This game is a tough one to assess, I'll be honest, because, as I said at the top, Victor Radley's in that HIA protocol, I think 8 days for him to clear that. If I had to bet, I'd say he probably is in, but there's that chance that he could be ruled out. I've said this multiple times. Roosters are extra cautious with their head knocks. And then Sam Walker, it's a typical sprained ankle to me that he did last week. I know they've named him, but again, are you going to throw an 18-year-old out there with a bit of a bum ankle? Because I think they could go Lachie Lamb to 7, Manu to 6, and there is even that chance Suali could debut in this one. So just with those injury clouds, you like to bet against a team where it's not 100% certain everyone's going to play, because we call that asymmetric risk, where if nothing happens, if no news comes out, you've got a fair line. But if anyone gets, ruled out, or potentially both those players get ruled out, we've suddenly got a really good line. This Cowboys team, not only are they named 1-17 at one last week, but they've actually quietly won 4 of the last 5 games. So they've been chugging along kind of a little bit under the radar, I would suggest. And they played it actually a Broncos side that ripped in last week, and credit to the Cowboys because they hung in there and actually got the win. So I think this is too many points for the Cowboys playing in Queensland in front of a few fans, as I said. I'm going to take the points now while we can get over 2 converted tries. Let's move to Sunday, where we have a triple header, and the Warriors play the Eels. The line is -7.5. Murdoch Masilla's in, Sirinen out for the Warriors, and for the Eels, Brown and Niokore are both suspended. They're kind of lucky that Wonga Blake is back from a torn calf. He comes in. I know some people don't rate Blake, so maybe they'll chuckle when I say they're lucky, but it's good timing that he comes back in to cover Niokore in the centres. And at 6, it's Brad Arthur's very own son, Jacob, nice name there, who is going to debut at 5'8", coming up from the reserve grade side. We should also mention Reid Marnie is in HIA protocol, and Brown didn't play last week and has this hip complaint. Now, I can't go against Parramatta. I really think that they're a quality team and people don't quite understand how good they are. And I think each week that they play quite comprehensively well shows that one Dragons loss where they did let us down was just one bad game, and a game where they fell behind and they got a bit rattled and things went from bad to worse. And even in that game, a couple of things go differently. Maybe they make a comeback, and this could be an undefeated team. So, as I say every week, I think the Eels pack is going to win the forward battle, and I see the same thing happening in this one. But you've got to give some credit to the Warriors. They've been really solid this season. They got that tight win over the Dragons. They hung on for a win against the Cows. They just fell short against Manly. They're also a team that's well and truly in the top 8 hunt. And on their best day, the Warriors are capable of competing with top 4 sides, but they could also lose 8+. So I think Eels absolutely can cover this game. They're also off the longer turnaround, the 9-day turnaround. And call me crazy, I think your coach's son debuting is a big factor, because I feel the whole squad will really want to be on their game to, put up a good performance and make life a bit easier for the kid who should only have a pretty simple role and just be asked to run the footy plenty at 5'8", and lean on other playmakers like Marnie, like Moses and Gutho to kind of play a bigger role. So I definitely can see the Eels come up with a good performance. I was that close again. I've talked about how I've been close with my leans. I was that close to making Eels -7.5 a best bet. So if you like it, it's only $1.90 on Sportsbet if you want to take the Eels. But what's just keeping me off is the fact that Marnie has not cleared HIA yet. Brown is no certainty with that hip. And they're also in this weird bind with the NRL COVID protocol that a few of their squad members who they've called in actually played New South Wales Cup last week. And I mentioned that we even benefited on the pod from a number of top 30 NRL players being all withdrawn from their New South Wales Cup games last week. And I was able to share in the NRL thread a $2.90 winning tip on the Sunday for who was it? It was against the Bulldogs reserve grade side that had like 9 blokes out. So that we even benefited from that, but the Eels may not benefit. I think it's all going to be all right. I think if these players all submit tests that show that they're COVID-free, they're going to be able to play. But there's that possibility of further disruption if anyone gets ruled out, or the fact that what's been doing the rounds, that the Eels may not actually have 17 eligible players. So you've got kind of these circumstances that could be sweet, but there's that chance, that asymmetric risk, again, that I was talking about before, that if you play Parramatta and all these things transpire against you and Marnie doesn't clear protocol and Brown can't go and the NRL stays strict and says, no, you guys didn't stay within the bubble restrictions that we laid down with your reserve grade players, so none of them are eligible because they want to kind of make an example out of Para, they could actually be suddenly in a tricky spot. So I don't want to be in that situation myself. So for now, I don't take that as a best bet with Parramatta, although I lean that way and I do think that they should be too good for New Zealand. 2 games to go because it's a triple header on Sunday. Time to hear from NRL Stats Man, who's been kind enough to share 2 of his favourite anytime try scorer picks for Magic Round and his reason behind it.
Evening, punters. When he's asked me to throw out a couple of tips for the annual Magic Round in Brisbane, I'll lay out the reasons why I think they're good things, or at least half decent things for the weekend. I'll start with the Friday night pick. Kalen Ponga's paying about $2.17 at Top Sport with their boost. So far this season, he has a 60% strike rate, having scored in 3 of his 5 games. And he scored in all 3 games versus the bottom 8 opposition. So up against the Tigers, I think is a good shot. The only games he hasn't scored in this year were versus the Roosters and the super strong Panthers outfit. He has a 57% strike rate versus the Tigers at fullback, scoring in 4 of the 7 matches over his career. In the last 5 contests between the 2 sides, a Knights fullback has scored in 4 of the 5 games, with Tex Hoy being the most recent recipient early in the year when Ponga was injured. Now for a value selection, we've gone with Max Feagai at $3 with Top Sport. That's without the boost, so I think you get $3.05 with the boost. I anticipate him going onto the left wing with Ravalawa returning onto the right, but apologies in advance if that changes, because I'm not sure what Griffo's got in mind down there. While Feagai hasn't scored in any of his outings so far in his 2 games of his career, a Dragons winger has scored in 89% of games this year, being 8 of the 9. And while the Storm are a great defensive unit normally, they have conceded a winger try in 78% of games, being 7 of the 9 games this year, with 63% of total tries conceded in 2021 have been on the right defence against left attackers. So this is why I think Figo on the left, if it's Ravalawa on the left, I want Ravalawa, but if it's Figo on the left, I want to go left. They're missing some of their superstars, which made them leave them a little bit depleted, with Munster, Grant, and sounds like Brandon Smith's obviously out as well. $3 I'm willing to find out for the Magic round in Suncorp. Hopefully he can get one in his third match. Anyway, happy punting all. Enjoy Magic round and enjoy the rest of the weekend. Cheers.
Thanks very much, Brent. So if you guys are into that type of analysis, that very statistical analysis, I highly recommend his group, NRL STATS MAN. I've got the graphic up on the screen. And he lays it all out for people in tables and showing percentages and all that. And he's been around a long time. He hasn't just popped up out of nowhere. So I've known about Brent, and he's shared a lot of content in the Tripod group for a long time. And I know that he puts in a lot of work behind everything he does. And I asked him... can you give me your favourite play of the round and then a bit more of a value play? But you can ask Brent yourself. I didn't say which bookie. I left it open to him to obviously find the best odds he could. It's just a happy coincidence. If you support the pod and you have a Toppy account, that his best 2 picks are on Top Sport. I say coincidence, but it is not a coincidence that Top Sport actually do have generally the best odds on anytime try scorers across the board if you do have a shop around for the best price on those. So if you like Brent's 2 picks, you can multi those together and get over $6 odds. Really interesting for me to hear his approach. What he obviously does, looks at it player by player, what's their personal strike rate to get a bit of a sense of how often that player is scoring, then their strike rate, the strike rate versus a specific opposition. Do they have a good strike rate when they play a certain opponent? And then cross-checking that with their opponent. How often does that opponent concede to a specific position group? And that's where he lands on his favourite anytime try scorer bets. And I know he's been doing pretty well this season. 2 games to go. The Storm play the Dragons and the line is 15.5. The Storm will be without Brandon Smith suspended, without Harry Grant hamstring, without Munster foot. Pappenhausen named in the reserves. I've heard that he just needs to get through training and he will play. So obviously that's a huge addition while you do have 3 massive outs. So when Pappenhausen comes in and plays fullback, I think the logical move would be Nico Hines to 6. And they've named Kenny Bromwich at 9. But I'd anticipate Tyson Smoothy will play most of the game at hooker. For the Dragons, Ravalawa is back from suspension, as Brent alluded to there, although he's on Figai for his value winger, anytime try scorer. The Dragons stopped their 3-game losing skid by beating the Bulldogs last week. Now, regarding the line move, which Tristan spoke about as well, I want to shout out Matt Simons because he tipped it in the group, plus 21.5 on the Dragons. And before that, he actually messaged me and let me know that he'd heard on the radio those players are out. And I've said to you guys, I don't do early best bets because if I post in the middle of the day on a Tuesday, before team lists are even announced, then, and the line is going to move instantly. I can guarantee it the second I post that. And then people are going to say, well, I didn't get on that. So, is it really it's going to count as a best bet, but how many people really got on it? So I've just said as a blanket rule, I won't do that. Every best bet I'm going to give out is either on this pod that you watch, that you can all watch at the same time on Wednesday night, or on Friday once all the markets are even more liquid and all information's known. And even after I've already tipped my hand, I may add a play or 2. But I was like, man, you could have got Dragons plus 22.5, and I was thinking maybe I've got to break my rule here because that is a great bet. I just know that's going to drop. I thought, it's just damned if I do, damned if I don't. So I'll tell you guys how I work. I sent this through to the guys that helped me and a bunch of my admins and said, boys, I would definitely suggest jumping on this and watching that line drop. And sure enough, it dropped very within an instance of that. So shout out to Matt Simons, who did tip it in the group. It's another example where I'm not going to get any credit for that if the Dragons cover, but people who are in the group who follow the post, you get extra jam from other great, diligent members of the group who find good information like that and act accordingly. Now, in saying all that, the Dragons are pretty lucky to catch the Storm on a week where not only you lose Munster, who's still, probably the best player in the game, but losing the Cheese and Harry Grant in the same week, obviously that's a cluster injury at a key position, a season removed from having Cam Smith there. Now you're down to your 4th string hooker from what it was a year ago, if that makes sense. The Storm on paper are still so good though, and their forward pack still looks exceptional. I know the Dragons have a strong forward pack as well. I can't play the Storm because this line's 15.5, and they're not playing a no-hoper team. They're playing the Dragons, who actually can rip in, and since Hunt has gotten back, he's obviously going to improve a little bit each week, recovering from that injury. So I lean to the Dragons still, even with this line moving 7 points from what it was on Tuesday, but I just won't make it a best bet because I've missed the best of the number. And sometimes you just got to have that discipline, because if it was a great bet at 22.5, how good of a bet is it at 15.5? And it still might be good, but in the long run, you won't do badly by just sometimes staying out of it if you've missed by far the key number or the best price. And finally, on Sunday night, the Titans play the Panthers, and there's a big personnel news out of this one. If you haven't heard, David Fifita has copped a 2-game suspension. Tino Fa'asuamaleaui came back from suspension last week. They won. They were quite impressive, although they played the Tigers, so it's hard to assess how good the Titans were versus how bad the Tigers were. But now Tino's got a virus or a bug or something. They said they've sent him home from training. But with a Sunday game, I'd still expect he'll play. Tanner Boyd remains in the 6th jersey as Ash Taylor's still out. For the Panthers, Kurt Capewell is out. And look, what can you say about this Panthers team? 9 from 9. It's hard to look for areas to improve, but I spoke about this on the recap. They're finding ways to improve by increasing the degree of difficulty that they play with and putting on plays that have just taken the piss and are so hard to stop. And actually, I do think the Panthers can find areas to improve, because one of their worst performances of the season, and you've got to be a harsh marker to call any of their performances bad, but was actually when they were tied against the Broncos with 5 minutes to go at this stadium. So maybe there's some motivation there to come up and put a better performance in at Suncorp. It's a big shame for the Titans that they don't have their marquee $1.3 million man for this matchup, because you need all the help you can get against the Panthers. And this line feels crazy. Did I mention it's 20.5, Panthers favored? But as I said with with that Dragon Storm game, I don't want to lay a huge number against a team that is not bad. And the Titans are not bad, so I'm not laying minus 20.5, but I don't have enough good reasons to go against Penrith. They're just, as I say every week, they're just a buzzsaw that you just don't want to get out in front of, so I won't, so I pass the game. That's the Magic Round previewed for you guys. I'm actually going to be there on Saturday, so shout out if you actually happen to be there. We can have a beer or whatever. Love to meet supporters of the pod. Let me know your feedback on the 2 best bets that I've shared, on the 5 leans I had, or any other plays that you like yourself, or any other factors that you think are worth considering. Thanks again, Tristan. Thanks again, Brant, NRL Stats Man. Enjoy the Magic Round of footy, boys, and I'll be back Sunday night to recap live. As always, gamble responsibly.